Good afternoon. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the Lena Bailey Lecture on Leadership. And my name is Cheryl Ochterberg. I'm the Dean of Education and Human Ecology here. This is an annual event in honor and to honor the leadership and experience and wisdom and guidance that Lena Bailey brought to this college. She was actually in administration and leadership here at Ohio State for 31 years. She started off as a department chair in what was then the Department of Home Economics in the College of, I think it was called Agriculture at that time. And then she became an acting director of a school of home economics, and ultimately became the first dean of the College of Human Ecology. And she's credited with helping not only Ohio State evolve, but the entire nation evolve into a new conception of what family and consumer science type work could be and should be, and how to serve the greater public. I also want to recognize this evening George Bailey, her husband, who has funded this annual event every year to help us commemorate the leadership that Dr. Bailey gave. And our custom, our tradition has been to invite a university or college president to speak to us about leadership. And tonight I'm very happy to introduce a local leader, a very fine leader, and we're especially proud of him because he's an alumnus of the college. And he shall be talking, David Harrison, this evening as the president at Columbus State Community College, but he's an Ohio native. I just learned he grew up in a very tiny town of 700 thereabouts, and shares some experience in life history with George in terms of a small town history, so that was fun to learn about. But Dr. Harrison attended school here, but he also went further afield and obtained, your first degree was in chemical engineering, and then you got an MBA, and then you got the PhD back here at Ohio State. But after receiving his PhD, he took a tour of Florida. And he worked at a couple of institutions there, including, I think, what is regarded as the fastest growing university in the nation. So he came back to Ohio and to Columbus State Community College after serving as a vice provost at University of Central Florida. I think you've been here 2 years now. It's flown by rather quickly. Let's welcome Dr. Harrison for tonight's lecture on leadership as a team sport.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for being here, and thanks for having me. This is a real honor to be here to honor Dr. Bailey, and I did really enjoy getting to know George. We share some Kentucky roots, and had a good time catching up on Wildcat basketball. So I appreciate that, and it's appropriate even for my topic here. I figure Friday night before the Illinois game was a good time to talk about this being a team sport. I think it's especially appropriate in this day and age. I think it's more important now perhaps than it's ever been. And I want to talk a little bit about my own background in terms of the experiences I've had that have led me to believe this, first of all. Really spent some time talking about partnerships, because I think that is the key to success for regions moving forward. Talk a little bit about some things that are going on locally, and then some skills that I think are really critical for 21st century leaders in this partnership space. And then if you're still with me and have any questions, I'll be glad to address those. Cheryl talked a little bit about my background, but most of my leadership skills I learned from 11-year-olds on the Pop Warner football field. I've spent a lot of time as a player years ago, but coaching my boys and others, and that has provided as much of a laboratory for leadership as I could hope for. You learn some important skills like communication, like cultural competency, like teamwork, like trust, and really being able to meet athletes where they are. You learn a lot about the importance of the staff, how important the team mom is to ongoing communication. And you learn, as much as anything, that to be a good coach, you got to have good athletes. I've coached teams that didn't win a game, and I've coached teams that didn't lose a game. And I was the same coach. So when you see Urban Meyer and everybody else out trying to recruit athletes, coach is going to be as good as his athletes, and that's an important lesson to learn. I've also been part of an adventure racing team called Roadkill. This is a group in Florida that my son and I were involved in, where you do a mountain run, a trail run, a mountain bike, and a canoe experience, coupled with orienteering. So you had to try to find marks while you were in the midst of this. This particular race was at the headwaters of the Florida Everglades. It started at 3 a.m. under a full moon. So you learn something about collaborative leadership when you're in a canoe 3 o'clock in the morning with alligators all around you, with your teenage son, trying to find a mark that probably doesn't even exist. So that's really, I learned a lot at Ohio State, but the truth is this is where my leadership experience, I think, has come from. So I want to talk a little bit about the role of the leader in this 21st century environment, because leadership has never been more important, but in some ways it's never been more difficult. And the role of the leader in this complex space, I think, is important as you consider the dimensions and the dynamics that are faced every day. And my contention is that the leader is not the quarterback. The leader's the coach. And again, making sure that you're putting your team in place to be successful in a very complex environment. I've been intrigued by some of the political discussion about folks who got where they are without any help. And I don't claim to be one of those. So I want to talk a little bit about this idea of the myth of the self-made and give you a little bit more of my personal background, because I think that the team sport nature of leadership is not just for practicing leaders, but it's how leaders are developed as well, and that's certainly been the case with me. No one gets to this point alone. I've had some really fortunate opportunities professionally. I was talking to some of the students about it before. Came to higher ed a little bit later in my career. As Cheryl said, I had an engineer with an MBA and was working for, now it's Accenture. It was Anderson Consulting then, Arthur Anderson and Company, back when that was a good thing to be on your resume, for those of you who remember Enron. Was at Accenture at a time when they were moving to a more specialized role. So the idea was we had to work more in teams because technology was going faster than any of us could keep up. You had to have specific technology skills or specific industry skills, and the mantra was the end of the Renaissance man or the end of the Renaissance woman. And again, the idea was we had to work together to do these big, complex projects. Well, I loved what I was doing, but it didn't really capture my heart completely. My daughter had been born, she's in the audience now as a junior at Ohio State. We'll come back to that in a minute. Didn't want to be a weekend dad. So my wife and I really started looking at what we might want to do next. And I came across an ad in the paper that said, "Create the Future." And it was a new project between Sinclair Community College and the University of Dayton. I'd gotten my engineering degree from UD. We lived in Pittsburgh at the time. So I learned a little bit more about it and talked to my boss about it. And said, here's the situation. You know, it's a nonprofit. As soon as I said that to him, I lost him because, again, this was a partnership-driven organization, right? It's a move up or move out organization, but it's a nonprofit designed to help manufacturing companies. I was working a lot with manufacturing companies, better lifestyle, those kinds of things. He said, "You're crazy. You can't do this. You know, you're on a partnership track. We've got big plans for you. You know, this will ruin your career. You can't do this." Go home to my wife and I said, "Well, here's what I've learned, honey. They've taken a 100-year-old paper company and converted it into this lab. They don't have any equipment yet. Budget's pretty small. I'll supervise 2 people." She said, "You got to do it." So the moral of the story, my first leadership lesson, was ignore your boss and listen to your wife. And I should probably stop here because this is really the only lesson that matters in terms of my own leadership development. But from there, I've really had a series of experiences that solidified my belief that partnerships are really what drive the best organizations in the world. Again, the AIM Center was a partnership, Advanced Integrated Manufacturing Center, between Sinclair and UD. So right away, I lived in that partnership space. As I was working in Dayton, that's when I was a student here, commuting 85 miles one way, 2 or 3 days a week to finish my doctorate. As Cheryl said, we went to Florida for 10 years. And most recently, the last 6 of those years, I was at the University of Central Florida, which states as one of its 5 goals to be America's leading partnership university. So there again, that was something that was really built in to the work that we were doing, and I think gave me a good background in really trying to understand and value the importance of partnerships in today's complex environment. So I want to talk a little bit about what leadership skills are required in that space and why these skills are so important now, because they lead to really strong partnerships, not superficial partnerships, but really strong, deep partnerships, which ultimately lead to solutions for complex problems. And I think that's the bottom line here. We've got a level of complexity that we're facing as institutions, as a society, that really are unsurpassed. And the ability to really collaborate in strategic ways is something that I think is going to set leaders apart, but most importantly, organizations apart. So why partner? Again, at UCF, President John Hitt there used to say all the time, we don't partner because it's easier. We partner because it allows us to do bigger and better things. And it isn't easy. There's nothing easy about it. But it really does, I think, put you in a position as an institution to do some things that you couldn't do on your own. One of the reasons is that it allows you to move faster. Now, this is counterintuitive when you think of organizations partnering and the time it takes to align your systems, processes, people, vision, values. But my contention is that that upfront investment in time really does then allow you to respond quickly as new opportunities emerge, as new issues come up. You know one another very well. You know what your strengths are, what their strengths are. You've already got the systems and processes aligned. Speed is as important as anything in today's environment. I love the quote that it's not the big that eat the small, it's the fast that eat the slow. And strong partners really allow you to move your organization along much faster. Partnerships are a force multiplier. They really allow you to develop interdependencies done well, to where strengths can complement one another and strengths can overcome other weaknesses, but it can also really provide synergy so that things that any one institution couldn't do on their own, you can do together. You can do a lot more together than you could separately. And what I tell our folks all the time, if you don't partner, you'll serve fewer students, you'll offer them fewer options, receive less funding, raise less money, miss opportunities, do more boring work, and have less fun. So that's a pretty important motivator, I think, for really trying to capture what the 21st century organization, the well-positioned 21st century organization can do. And why are partnerships so hard? Well, the main reason is because people are involved. And that's really where leadership comes into play. So again, the kind of partnerships that I'm talking about aren't transaction level kinds of work. It's really deep alignment, organization to organization, which takes a whole different set of leadership, not just at the top, but throughout the organization. Why is this so important now? Because collaborative skills have been in leadership textbooks forever. It's been something that I certainly learned here. But I believe that the degree to which this is important has elevated to a point that it's never been before. Cheryl said I've been here a little more than 2 years, starting July of 2010, and immersed myself in the community as much as I could in terms of really trying to understand what was going on, what the pinch points were, what the hopes were, what the anxieties were as a community, and what Columbus State's role should be. And there are a handful of data points that have really shaped a lot of our energy going forward since then. One of the things I learned was that 41% of our recent high school graduates are coming to college unprepared to do college level work. That was one of the first spreadsheets that I saw from the Ohio Board of Regents when I was here. Now, as you peel that 41% back, what you find is that at OSU's main campus, that number is 0%. Columbus State, it's 80. That's how you get to 41%. So if I'm going to graduate, if my college, if Columbus State is going to graduate more students, is going to help more students succeed in college, that's a number that I've got to pay attention to and perhaps do something about. 43% of Ohio public school students are economically disadvantaged. That's up from 33% just 5 years ago. And 11 of Franklin County's 16 school districts have a rate of disadvantaged students above 20%, and 5 of those have rates at 50% or higher. So there's a level of need in this community that I had no idea of when we came in. Again, as a community college, that means something to us. 9 out of 10 jobs that require a high school diploma or less are either in low-wage jobs or in declining industries. So the need for post-secondary education for all students has never been greater than it is today. And 25% of college students in America are what we would consider traditional college students, meaning that they're full-time students living residentially at a 4-year program, a college or university, and having most of their expenses paid by their families, 25%. The other 75% are at Columbus State, are working on their own from college to college, are working, have family responsibilities, are commuting great distances, returning veterans, those kinds of things. So those factors together converge to really help us understand at Columbus State that we might have a unique role in this space, but that we couldn't do it alone. So I want to talk a little bit about the college as I set the stage for a broader community partnership, which in some ways is a good case study in collaboration, but also I think the leadership skills that are required in that space. We're the front door to higher education for most Central Ohioans, even now. So for the class of 2010, a little over 900 students in the 4-county area that Columbus State serves, Franklin, Madison, Union, and Delaware counties. A little over 900 students came to OSU's main campus from that graduating class. Over 1,500 from that same space came to Columbus State. So already you see that more students are starting at Columbus State than in any, more regional students, more local students are starting at Columbus State than in any other location. That puts us in a unique position and I think provides some unique responsibilities for us. We're one of the largest and most comprehensive community colleges in America. We've got a history of innovation in the workforce development space, deep partnerships with employers in the region. I say it all the time, we've got 27,000 students. They all want to go to work. They're all looking for a job. And we are really trying to align our programs as directly as we can with not just a job, but a career that's going to be in this region. Almost all of our students are from here, and they all want to stay here. So our ability to help connect them with high-skill, high-wage jobs is important to us. We're highly diverse in every aspect, both in our student body and in the work that we do, and we think that that is an important role that we play in our region. We're the region's only open access institution, public institution in higher education. So again, that really does position us as the front door to higher education for many, soon to be most, students in our region. And we've got some real momentum around university transfer programs that I think are really emblematic of this kind of collaboration, this deep partnership that I'm talking about. As OSU, for example, continues to increase freshman admission standards, as the same thing happens at the many great private institutions that we have, Otterbein Capital, Ohio Dominican, Ohio Wesleyan. Franklin University does a lot of great work with us for adult students. As the tuition differential between the community college and the universities continues to widen, again, more and more students are going to choose Columbus State as a starting point. As I came into Columbus, I certainly recognized that. Cheryl mentioned that at UCF, it was one of the fastest growing universities in America. A lot of that was fueled by the partnership with community colleges. And even as UCF has continued to grow, over half of their bachelor's degrees are awarded to community college transfers. That was the space I worked in with regional campuses. So I knew that there was a real opportunity for deeper collaboration with Ohio State. What I didn't know was that Ohio State understood that all too well, and that President Gee and his staff were really waiting and ready for that kind of partnership. So early on in our discussion, we started talking about how we can more closely align in this 2+2 and 3+1 space. We both recognize that it's in everybody's best interest, it's in our whole state's best interest that Ohio State become the most prominent research institution in the world. But it's also important that they keep their land grant credentials, that they keep their land grant space. And the ability to partner with Columbus State to guarantee a pathway to a bachelor's degree for students in our region was something that we both had real interest in. And that's what led to the Preferred Pathway Program, which was really the first domino in this set of collaborative relationships. And Preferred Pathway really opened the door for this guaranteed pathway for Columbus State graduates to transfer to Ohio State. We've got an alignment in place for intrusive advising at the freshman level. So when students come to Columbus State as freshmen, knowing they want to transfer to Ohio State, they're connected with an OSU advisor. Say it all the time, I don't want to just get my students into Ohio State. What I really want to do is get them out. And when they transfer, I want them coming to Ohio State as juniors in their chosen field of study. And that kind of deep collaboration at the advising and curriculum level has really allowed it to happen. As we were putting together the Preferred Pathway framework, we realized that, well, we had just opened a new campus in Delaware County on 23. OSU had a Delaware Center about 2 miles or so south of where we were. And we kind of decided, if we're going to do this, we might as well do it. So before the ink was dry on the Preferred Pathway Agreement, OSU moved out of their Delaware Center and into our Delaware campus. And I think that is a great example of, in some ways, the leap of faith that's required, the level of leadership that's required to deal in these ambiguous times. Recognizing that the level of trust is there, the shared vision is there. We may not have all the details worked out, but we're going to shake hands and figure it out as we go. We're in our second year now with this partnership, and it continues to get stronger. So this relationship started to really get the attention of school superintendents. As I was, again, still new in town, I was doing a lot of initial interviews, a lot of introductory interviews with superintendents. And a couple of things that were really encouraging. First of all, the numbers that I showed you, they were well aware of. They weren't defensive about it, and they wanted to do something about it together. Dave, how can we work together to make sure more of our students are college ready? Preferred pathway instantly meant something to all of the high school guidance counselors in the area, because many of them and the families that they're working with, and when they were coming up through college, Ohio State was the safety school. I grew up in Cincinnati, graduated in 1980. OSU was open admission at that time. And that's the way a lot of people my age remember it. Clearly that's not the case now. So helping high school guidance counselors understand the new way that college can be done and their students can be successful in college was an important piece that the superintendents wanted to connect with. So we started to build some momentum around this idea of a regional strategy and started really asking ourselves, what kind of regional partnership could really ensure that all of our high school graduates come to college ready to do college level work? Is there a partnership model in place where we could increase the number of high school graduates that are earning college credit while they're still in high school? If we combined resources in some creative way, could we dramatically increase the number of students that were earning credentials, bachelor's degrees, associate's degrees, workforce certificates? And by doing this, is there a model that really can reduce the costs to families if students are earning college credit while they're still in high school, or if they're taking community college credit for part of their bachelor's degree? That's going to reduce costs to families. But if OSU and Columbus State are sharing space, that's going to reduce costs to taxpayers. We had a similar arrangement that we were working on with Reynoldsburg High School. They had built a new high school last year, moved into it last year, opened up some space that they didn't have a need for. They're giving us that space. We move in this coming January to dramatically accelerate our dual enrollment work with them so that more of their students, while still in high school, can earn college credit. These kinds of things can really have a ripple effect. What if we combined all of these kinds of efforts in a broad strategy around advancing these goals for our region? And for the last year and a half, we've been working towards that in this partnership we call the Central Ohio Compact. Central Ohio, as many of you know, Columbus area, is one of the largest college towns in America, especially as it relates to the number of students enrolled. That's really how it's measured. We've got an opportunity, I think, to take these assets and align them in a purposeful way so that more students are not just enrolling in college, but are earning degrees, doing it quicker, and being prepared for whatever's next in their lives, either graduate school or the workforce. And that's really what the Central Ohio Compact allows us to do. So we've got partners in 4 counties, actually 5 now with Licking County, who are committed to the Lumina Foundation's 60% goal. The Lumina Foundation has set a goal for America that 60% of our adults have a post-secondary credential by the year 2025. So as we got the partners together for the Central Ohio Compact, we adopted that goal as our framing strategy for our regional work. The Central Ohio area currently is at 44%. The state of Ohio is at 36%. There's a skills gap of about 30% in that space, and this is designed to close that skills gap. So the focus is to dramatically increase the number of students earning a post-secondary credential, ensuring that all college-bound high school graduates are college ready, as I said. Really increase the velocity, if you will, of college attainment with a real focus on completion. Again, it's not just about getting students in, it's about getting them out. And to do this in a way that takes advantage of all of the region's assets. So in addition to OSU, we've got all of our private colleges that have been part of this, and we've got school districts and school boards that are involved throughout our region. One of the principles of any good partnership is to get it in writing. And especially our K-12 partners felt it was important to have a joint resolution that really codified these principles of the Central Ohio Compact that they could take to their Board of Education for public approval. So we're in the process now of having this approved by a number of colleges and universities in the region, as well as a number of school districts. We'll be rolling this out formally November 13th at a statewide trustees meeting. But the energy around this, I think, has provided the opportunity for leaders to collaborate, but then importantly, bring their institutions and their governing boards along in a way that could position Central Ohio as a leader in certainly college attainment, but ultimately in economic development and credentials attainment. So what leadership skills are required in this new environment? If things like the Central Ohio Compact, if initiatives like Preferred Pathway are going to be more the norm, it's not enough just to be able to lead your own organization. You've got to figure out ways to collaborate with others. As I close, I've got a few areas that I think are important that I want to share with you. First is trust. This is something that's hard to develop, but it's easy to lose. One of the things as you start to get into this partnership work that you realize is partnerships aren't between institutions, they're between people. And the ability to have a group of folks who will return your calls is really the key to success in working in this space. But to really understand how this work is going to help your partner, have them understand how it's going to help you, but most importantly, have you understand together how you're going to be able to do work for the community, for the region, whatever the greater good is, that you couldn't do alone. And that there's a unique bond, a unique opportunity to collaborate in that space. So trust certainly at the organizational level, but at the personal level is really important. This is hard because, especially when you think of higher education, a lot of people think of us as competitors, including people in our own institutions. So the ability to really be visible, be open, and be intentional with regard to developing that level of trust is an important key to success. I mentioned my daughter was in the audience. I'm going to pick on her a little bit. Another important one, and maybe the most important one, I think, is cultural competency. When I was in school, technology skills were really the coin of the realm. That's what was embedded in me. You know, if you're going to be successful, you've got to be well-versed in technology. You've got to be comfortable in that space. You've got to be a technological leader. I really think that that's been replaced by this idea of cultural competency. Now, one of the things you've already learned is that my clip art comes from my family photos. Last spring, we were hiking in Hocking Hills. Julie was there with some of her friends, all OSU students. They were trying to connect with one who was coming later. I warned her that there was no cell phone service up there. So they were trying to connect as we were driving up. It never happened. And at the trailhead, lo and behold, there was a payphone. So my daughter and her friends stared at it for a while, looked up at me and said, "I've never used one of these." But it really doesn't matter. She's a Spanish major, business minor. She's on her way to Panama next month with her emerging markets class. She'll have visited a dozen countries by the time she graduates from Ohio State. The cultural competency that she has is going to be, again, her coin of the realm in the same way that technology was for me. been involved in a mission work in Guatemala for the last several years. The last 2 years, I've taken each of our boys. This is our youngest son, and that is as good an example of any of the kind of 21st century leadership that I try to emulate. This mission was started a dozen years ago by Norris Allen, who's down here, your bottom left corner with me. Norris and his wife started this, like I said, 12 years ago in this little village of Latoma. Not understanding the language, not understanding the culture, but understanding people and understanding service. And now Norris has assembled a team that spreads across 4 states that will have a team down there, a different team down there from January through April. And he and Fran haven't been down there for the last 2 years because of failing health. So again, when you talk about the leader as the coach, not the quarterback, I think this is Norris Allen, age 75, from Franklin, Tennessee, is as strong with regard to 21st century leadership skills as anybody that I know. Communication is paramount. And working in this partnership space, it's impossible to communicate enough. You really need to over-communicate. And even then, you don't get it right. But the ability to continue to connect in ways that make sense to your partner. Again, communication and trust really go hand in hand. You want to work hard so there are no surprises. You want to make sure that you are engaged in conversation while things are in process, and make decisions together jointly. Feedback is vital. Our youngest son's 15, and I'm teaching him to drive. My wife has graciously delegated that responsibility to me. So a couple of Saturdays ago, we took the lap around 270. That was going to be that day's lesson to do some highway driving. And Saturday morning, 270 is a mess. So a lot of traffic at Easton, all kinds of construction over by Dublin and Hilliard. We get back to the house, not really saying much to each other. His mother does a debrief with him. Well, Sam, how did it go? And my son says, Mom, he never tells me what I'm doing wrong. All he does is scream my name. And he was right. So it occurred to me that probably wasn't very good communication, that me just saying Sam wasn't telling him what he needed to do. So based on that feedback, I've started to say, slight left, hit your brakes softly, good job, doing a lot of that. But that kind of communication, that kind of feedback is important. This is one of my favorite quotes around communication by George Bernard Shaw. The problem with communication is the illusion that it has been accomplished. You can never do this enough, and you've got to just know going in that having a communication plan between partners is important. Picking up the phone, sending emails, texting each other, making sure that you're over-communicating is key. Teamwork, perhaps it goes without saying, is vital, but the space here that I want to talk a little bit about is the effect partnerships have within your organization. It's one thing for President Gee and I to shake hands and do a deal, or for me to work with the superintendent to do a deal, but it's really our faculty and staff that are going to have to do the work. So making sure that the value is understood of the partnership, really making sure that they're, the people that are involved understand their role and understand the connection, and importantly, making sure that they have an avenue to express their concerns, because there are details of these kinds of arrangements that really are the moment of truth in terms of whether things are going to work or not. And it's the folks that are working directly with students every day that really understand that. So creating that kind of culture as a leader, so that if you're heading down a path that really may not be in our best interest, you're allowing folks to be involved in that and to provide that kind of feedback, and importantly, getting them involved in the relationship with their peers at the partner institution. That's where I think the sweet spot is as it relates to these kinds of partnerships. And then, importantly, you need to take the long view. Persistence and patience in these kinds of large-scale projects is an important and maybe the most challenging leadership skill. The path is rocky. The path is uncharted in many cases. You usually kind of know where you want to head, but you really don't know how to get there. So the ability to really see it through, sustain it, be okay with mistakes, have some tolerance for ambiguity, have faith in your partner even if you don't have the depth of the plan in place like we're doing with OSU in a couple of areas, and the kind of ripple effect, the kind of magnitude that I think we can really have with regard to impact and partnerships is unsurpassed. I really believe we have an ecosystem in Columbus of collaboration that's unmatched anywhere in the country. And the opportunity to continue to develop these kinds of skills, develop these kinds of partnerships is, I think, going to move our region forward in the 21st century. I really appreciate being with you today. I'd be happy to take any questions that you have.
Regarding cultural competency, I've been retired for 10 years from this college, and even many years before then, there was a suggestion that all students take a foreign language, but the foreign language department couldn't handle that. I think to this day, a foreign language isn't required. Comment on the need for that, as well as other alternatives to achieving or helping students work toward cultural competency.
Well, I mean, foreign language is a great step, but there are other ways to do it. I've given a couple of high school commencement speeches, and one of the things I tell all students to do is get a passport. I mean, just have it. Even if you don't have plans to go abroad, have it so that if the opportunity presents itself, you're ready. And then make the opportunity present itself. Immerse yourself in some way in some international activity. I was having lunch with a colleague this week. His daughter is a recent college graduate, was interviewing for a job with a national retailer. The question she was asked was, in an interview, 22-year-old, why do Central American families avoid using car seats for their children? I'm not going to go into the answer or the result. She got the job, so she got the right answer, I guess. But that's the kind of question that's being asked in entry-level job interviews. So understanding cultural differences, you don't have to travel abroad to do it. I think we all know that. It's one of the reasons I was talking to the students before. One of our strategic priorities at the college is in civic engagement, social responsibility space. Almost all of our students are from here in Albany State. So we're really trying to make sure that the experience they have at Columbus State connects them to Columbus in a meaningful way, so that they understand the city, the community that they live in, and what their role might be. So we're trying to build that in through service learning and other kinds of opportunities. So I think it's got to be intentional. I don't think there's a silver bullet solution, but as we work with students young and old, helping them understand that this is a value, including a market value, is something that I think is an opportunity. Yes, ma'am.
What kind of goals do you have for the preferred pathway program?
Well, I mean, plain and simple, we want to create an opportunity for anybody, any student in our region with the ability and desire to earn a high state bachelor's degree, gives them the opportunity to do so. Important principle of preferred pathway is eliminating uncertainty. So families and students have have an opportunity now. There's any number of reasons that 17-year-old is going to get a 28 on their ACT. Admission standards are up and 529s are down. All of these are exclusive kinds of points as it relates to college admissions. Preferred pathway is completely inclusive. So again, those with the ability and desire, guarantees opportunity. It doesn't guarantee you're going to make it. It guarantees them the opportunity, which again, eliminating uncertainty and really giving them that confidence that those variables have been managed, I think is the. Yes, sir.
David, how do you go about getting your board on board?
Right here's the question, how do you go about getting the board on board? I thought it was interesting that, again, especially our K-12 partners wanted to go to the voters. They wanted something that was a public commitment to the Central Ohio Compact. It's really communication and education and helping, for those of you who don't know, Columbus State Power Board, we have a 9-member board, all of them are appointed by the governor. They're all volunteers. They all have day jobs. So they're not community college experts. They're experts in their own field. So a big part of my job is to help them understand the environment, help them understand the conditions within which they're making decisions. And each step of the way, we keep them actively informed and make sure they're part of the process. And ultimately, I was talking to one of our staff members the other day and talked about me. She said, well, I told the folks I have a boss I've got to report to. And I said, yeah, I know, I've got 9 of them. And they all bring unique value to what we're doing. But it is important that we keep them in line. Preferred pathway, we get our own joint resolution between Columbus State and Ohio State, so that our boards collectively were part of that. One of the reasons I think that board engagement is really important is, the fact is presidents come and go, leaders come and go, and as it relates to preferred pathway, what we're trying to do is create an expectation in our community that this is how college is done, that this is really the way going forward that many students are going to earn a bachelor's degree. I think we're having the trustees involved in that space. Certainly.
I would like to ask you about that figure of 41% or 0 to 80% of the number of students who are not prepared to do college work. I think it's one thing to have a pathway and have agreement among community colleges, universities, public, private institutions that we're going to smooth the way once they get here. But isn't it troubling to you that so many students cannot do the work at a college level once they do get here? And how are we addressing that? What are the public school superintendents saying to you about how are we going to solve these problems to get them ready to enter this pathway?
Well, I glossed over it, but we're doing it together. So we are in Columbus State is in about a dozen high schools right now with kind of a two-pronged approach. So we're working with high schools so that this is an oversimplified model. Each school does it a little differently. At the end of the junior year, we're working with them to assess college readiness. If a student is college ready at the end of the junior year, we have what's called a dual enrollment path. So it's college level coursework that students are taking in the senior year, so that not only are they coming college ready, but they're coming with some college credit. If in that assessment they are not college ready, we are working our math. This is really the math space right now. It's the only place we're working right now. But our math faculty are working with their math teachers on a self-paced, mastery-based program, so that the math sequence that they may have taken at Columbus State as a freshman, which is developmental, which is pre-college, they're taking that in high school, and they're going through it again in a self-paced way, so that they're essentially trying to make the senior year more productive. So they're not spending their financial aid dollars, they're not spending time doing remediation, but they're in the same remediation path with our faculty across the high school. So we've done that at Reynoldsburg in the last 2 years. As I said, we scaled up this year now at about a dozen different high schools. That's an important principle of the Central Ohio Compact, that we're, in the same way that we're collaborating more deeply with Ohio State, we're also collaborating much more deeply with our high school partners. Certainly.
One of my good friends, he was the president of Ohio Northern University. He made a comment to me not too long ago that he feels, this is kind of an economic question, hope it's not too far off. But he made a comment that he thinks that the economic model, the business model of students paying the vast majority of the cost of going to college is a broken business model. I wonder if you could comment on the cost of going to college these days and the affordability issue, and is it a broken business model?
I think there are multiple business models. All colleges and universities aren't operating under the same business model. In the aggregate, I think there's some real concerns. I mean, many of you have read the same articles that I've read that student debt is going to be the next bubble after housing. If you take a look at why there was a housing bubble to begin with, it's because too many people pay more than they can afford for their house. There are a lot of ways to go to college that don't cost a lot of money. And during the first 2 years, or in some cases, more than 2 years at a community college is one way to do it. And that is a way to make college affordable for all and for students to graduate debt-free. So I believe the business model is going to adjust, and it's already happening in a lot of ways. Private institutions like Ohio Northern, who are tuition dependent, becomes difficult, and there are market forces at work. The state publicly funded institutions, and the states are supporting less and less. Ohio, frankly, has been very generous with regard to state support compared to many other states. I spent 10 years in Florida. I can tell you some stories. So, we're as well positioned as any state, but expectations are going to continue to go up and outpace the level of public funding. So that's where I think collaboration really comes into play, and the ability to not just collaborate, but even integrate, so that there are these discrete pathways, there's a guaranteed price point, eliminating uncertainty, as I talked about with students, and certainly right here in Central Ohio, we've got a pathway that students can graduate debt-free. But it takes planning. You've got to get students and families engaged early on, and that's why this collective community understanding, we think is really important.
Well, let's thank Dr. Harrison. Just outside the door. I invite you all to attend, and then if you'd like to pursue further